welcome everybody to Operation Pause for Homes Tips and Tricks session. Today is on choosing a foster, things to consider. My name is Valerie and I'm a volunteer and a recent OPH adopter. This session is being recorded. Everyone's muted to prevent background noise, but you can unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question, or please use the chat to post questions and comments anytime. We'll definitely have time for Q&A at the end. And again, you can unmute yourself if you like. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Krista Kowalski. Krista has been working in the animal welfare field since 2016 and has spent 5 years managing the dog population for her local shelter. She earned her certification as a canine training and behavior specialist in 2019. Krista has been with Operation Pause for Homes since 2022 and enjoys sharing her knowledge of dogs with fosters and adopters. So over to you, Krista.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you guys for being here this evening. Hopefully you will get something from this session and be able to pass on some things to think about when choosing a foster. And one of the first things that we're talking about today is OPHs Mission. And in order to accomplish our mission of helping companion animals, we need to be selecting animals to transfer from our rescue partners who are desirable candidates for our public. By selecting desirable animals, we can keep a foster's time and care lower, which enables us to transfer more animals and continue to make space for animals in need with our shelter partners. Now, please don't get me wrong. We absolutely do want to be able to help everyone. But if we end up transferring animals who end up staying for long stays in our foster homes, that then prevents us from being able to take on more animals. So these are just some things to consider. So that hopefully we can keep that flow going. And we can go ahead to the next slide. So some factors that can affect our foster's length of stay in the foster home are as follows. Some things that we can kind of manage and think about when we're selecting our fosters are the age of our foster, the breed, and now I'm just saying what it looks like because obviously we don't know 100% of what our breeds are of our animals that we are transferring in. This also includes size. We do want to make sure that we're getting some variety because we know that people like all sorts of dogs. So we want to make sure that we don't have, just a bunch of one type of dog. We want to make sure that we're trying to have variety. And we also want to consider if a dog has any known history. And we can go on to our next slide. So when I am talking about their known history, even if we don't know a ton about the dog, we still may be able to get some information and have an idea of what the process may be like getting that dog used to our home and then eventually a permanent home. So some of the things that I like to think about are the length of stay at the shelter, because usually if they stay longer, they may have some more challenging behaviors to work through at the beginning because they're not used to living in a home, or at least not for a little while. So that can have an impact on that dog's behavior. And depending on how long their stay in the shelter is and when during their development their stay at the shelter took place, they may have more challenges when adapting to life in a home. Something else that we can consider is how did they enter the shelter? Did they come in as a stray, or were they previously owned and surrendered to the shelter? If they were previously owned, what information do we have on that animal? Why were they surrendered? Was it, due to a behavior issue that they were already having, or was it through no fault of their own? The owners couldn't afford them anymore, or something of that nature. Anything like that is going to be able to give us a little bit more information. What ages of people did they live with? Did they live with other pets? Were there any reported problems, behavioral problems in the home? And anything of that nature is going to make our work a lot easier, especially if it does end up being a pet that we can transfer into the shelter. All of that information is going to be really helpful when finding them a more permanent placement. If we have information that they have lived successfully with kids previously, that's a lot less information that we have to try and gather. And that is exactly how I would phrase it, is that they have lived successfully with children before. Like I was talking about, with this history, we can also see if we have any information on how they did with other dogs. Some of our shelter partners, even if they don't have a history because the dog wasn't a surrender, they do play groups. So we might have a better idea of how that dog does with other dogs. And dogs who have had positive experiences with other dogs are going to be more highly adoptable, just in general, than dogs who are fearful or reactive. And that is not to say that every person who adopts from us wants more than one dog, but it makes your life a lot easier when you can take your dog places with you and not be concerned about fear or reactivity. And that I'm not just saying, the extra things that we all like to do, like say going to a winery or a brewery, because that is very fun, absolutely, and not possible with dogs who are reactive or fearful. But I'm also saying things like taking them to the vet is a lot less stressful if you know that they are a little bit more relaxed around other dogs. And then we can go on to our next slide. Puppies and kittens. So we are not just focusing on dogs in this session. We are talking about cats a little bit too. And puppies and kittens do come with their own challenges. So as cute as they are very time consuming. Kittens and puppies are messy, and as soon as you get them cleaned up, it is likely that they will have another mess that you now have to clean. They also have not learned how to appropriately interact with people, and they will often display inappropriate behaviors like chewing, including on you. So these are all things to think about when you are considering whether or not you want to foster a litter of puppies or kittens. I also know that we do have numerous fosters who puppies and litters of puppies are their bread and butter. So if you want a better idea, I know that Casey Clark has done a lot of puppies. So I'm sure she would be happy to discuss all of the joys and all of the struggles that come with fostering litters if you are interested in going down that route. The other option, if they are not just puppies or kittens traveling alone, if they are old enough to be away from mom, but they may come with mom. And puppies or kittens that come with mom can often be easier, at least in that first couple of weeks, because mom will do a lot of the cleanup work for you, but you will still need to help her out. And there are instances where mom is very protective of her babies, and so you'll have to spend some time earning her trust before being able to fully interact with the puppies or the kittens. Another thing to just keep in mind if considering taking on a mom with puppies or kittens is that moms do have to wait 2 to 4 weeks post-weaning to be spayed to go home. However, I did learn that we have some fosters who like taking on the moms once they are done being a mom and get some time to go back to just being a dog. So that is an opportunity as well. It is not necessary that you will have to keep mom for the entire time that she is with her puppies or kittens. And then in that time before she can be spayed, there are opportunities to have mom go to her own foster home, which honestly I think would be a good thing for her to get that kind of a clean break and be able to be like, cool, I'm totally away from my kids and now I can just focus on me, because we all need that, right? All right, we're ready for our next slide. So something else that we want to consider is when the level of socialization in the pets that we are selecting. So when picking puppies, we need to consider where they are in their development process. And when possible, we should find out as much about a puppy's history as we can. If they are under 4 months old, they have still not gone through one of their critical socialization periods. And so they will be likely easier to place, because then once we can get them exposed to a lot of different things and build up their confidence. And that will still be happening before one of their critical socialization periods ends, which is absolutely going to make them easier to place. If they are older puppies who are reaching that adolescent phase, starting around 7 months old, we need to consider their history before they were at the shelter, because pups who have gone through a critical socialization period while living in a shelter environment may have some behavioral issues, which may make them more difficult to place. Behavioral challenges could include extreme fearfulness due to lack of exposure. And this could be, they may not see people other than the times that they stop by to clean and feed them. The shelter that they're in may not have time to do much more than that with them, which can definitely lead to some challenges. And they can also display some inappropriate behaviors just due to lack of any knowledge of how to behave otherwise. And we also want to be considering how their length of stay at the shelter could be affecting their behavior, because if we're, say you have a dog who we're looking to transfer and they're about a year old, but they've spent the last 6 months of their life in the shelter environment, that may be a very challenging dog to take on, because they went through a large chunk of their adolescent phase. A long portion of their life at that point in time has been in the shelter environment. So that dog may come with a lot of challenges, which may make it harder on you as a foster to work through, and then harder to place as well, which will result in them staying with us longer in the rescue as well. Special needs. So there are some special needs that OPH is able to take on, but the pet may need to stay with you longer. Heartworm is something that OPH is able to treat when we transfer pets. And this is something that we really do need to celebrate, because having worked in a shelter personally, I know that not everyone can take heartworm positive animals. It is very good when we are able to take them, but we know that we can't take every single one that has heartworm. And these heartworm dogs, depending on when they have started their treatment process, they do need to be with their foster through treatment and for 2 weeks after the final treatment before they can go home. So if you do select a pet who is heartworm positive, please expect that they will be with you for about 4 to 6 weeks at least before they can actually go home. Okay. Something else that we want to look for when we are selecting a foster is we want to look at these photos that we're seeing. I like to say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. I know that a lot of people know that phrase. And what we want to look for is we want to look for photos where we do see the dog being relaxed in certain situations. And do remember that when you are looking at our Facebook albums for fosters, oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes there will be additional pictures of that dog in the pictures comments. So make sure that you look through, because you might get a better idea of that dog's overall sociability. Yes, they may look fearful in that first intake picture. It is very scary. But if they look fearful in every picture that you see of them, that may be a pretty challenging dog to take on. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't take anyone who is scared, but it is something to consider when you are selecting them as a foster, is that if they look that terrified, they might take longer to adjust to your home and then to be adopted, depending on how quickly they come out of their shell in your foster home. There are some dogs who are absolutely terrified in the shelter and are completely different once they're out of that environment. So I'm not saying to don't take any scared dog ever. It's just that I want you guys to have these types of things in the back of your head when you are selecting a foster. Some of these photos are really good examples of, this one, the chocolate tricolor, is a really good example of one who looks pretty fearful in the kennel environment, but then you see he's out in a play yard and he looks a lot more relaxed. His whole facial expression looks softer. So if we see a couple of different pictures of the animal, that may help us to have a better idea of how that animal is going to do in our foster home and how quickly they may relax in the foster home. I like to look for the dogs who look very loose and wiggly. Again, if they have a picture or two that they look a little bit more timid, we don't know everything that's going on in the circumstance that that picture was taken, but it may just give us a good idea of how that dog's sociability may be. And then one of the last things that we do want to consider is we want to consider our own personal plans. And so when we are signing up to take a foster home, we do want to make sure that we are taking our upcoming plans into account. If we are going away the week after transport, it may not be the right time to take on a foster. And I know that that can be pretty hard to think about, especially when we send pleas asking for fosters, and especially when there are circumstances when pets are at risk for euthanasia. It is very hard to say no, but we do know that dogs do take several days, most dogs anyway, take several days to decompress after the stress of transport. So if we're having to transport them in and then automatically move them within that first week, that can be a lot more stressful on them. So it is just something to think about, because we don't even always have another foster to move them to. We may be looking into moving to boarding, which is then a stressful environment as well. And I think we are ready for questions, if anyone has any.
Krista, since I'm kind of new to OPH and I'm not a foster, and I honestly don't intend to be one because I have 2 dogs now. I'm just wondering some stats. How many fosters do we have? Like, do we have a deep bench?
That is a very good question. I don't actually know how many active fosters we have currently. That would be a very good question to have answered. I don't know if anybody on the call, Robin, I know you do some of the moving around. I don't know if you have an idea of how many fosters we have currently.
See.
Okay, you're not sure either. It's a great question. I'll see if I can dig around and find out for you.
I'm just curious. And
I mean, we do have enough that our last transport, we were able to take 60 animals.
wow.
That did include some puppies. So those were groups.
Sure.
It did also include a mom with puppies, which we did have some last minute rotating because the mom was coming with 11 puppies. And so the person who felt like they could take on the mom with 11 puppies was like, well, I'm supposed to take these puppies. So if someone else can take this smaller group, I can take that mom with those puppies. So we did end up having some switching around in order to accommodate all of those kids. So again, it's kind of hard to say because some of those were groups.
Mm-hmm.
But we were able to take 60 off of 60 animals total. And that included cats as well as dogs off of the last transport.
And what is the process for, I guess, someone, not us, but someone to make the selection on which dogs and cats do get transferred in?
So we have shelter coordinators who are in touch with each of our different rescue partners. And I know that Lauren Lenner is one of them, and I know that she's actually gone down and visited some of the shelters that she is partnered with. So she's able to take photos and videos and met some of these dogs in person. And so they have really good connections with their shelter partners, and they work very diligently with them to get as much information as possible, and to be able to try and pick fosters who would progress. And so that is all on them.
Wonderful. Well, my dogs are starting to wrestle loudly. I don't see any other questions in the chat. So let me go to the last slide and you can do a teaser. So what's describing?
I think I saw one more question in the chat.
Oh, one just, okay, you're right.
So from what I know, as far as, so the question is, do we know what's caused the slowdown in adoptions, which has then in turn slowed down fosters being able to take more dogs? We do actually know that adoptions being lower right now is a national trend. I don't know all of the reasons, but it is a national trend that we are seeing. It's not just OPH. I don't know if it's just that people are in tougher financial situations or what the circumstance is, but it is a national trend that adoptions have been down. I don't know that much of it has to necessarily do with summer plans, because the shelter that I worked for 7 years, we used to always, summers used to be big for adoptions. Like during the summertime, we were transferring dogs regularly into our shelter because of the fact that we actually couldn't keep dogs on our adoption floor. A lot of people, even though people do sometimes have summer plans, they do see it as a good time to adopt because of the fact that their kids are off for the entire summer. So they have time to like bond with the animal and do things with the animal. So I'm not entirely sure what the factors are in the current slowdown of adoptions, but I do know that it is a national trend. So we're not alone. If anybody else has any other questions, even if they're not completely on topic, I'm totally open to answer any questions that you guys have right now.
Thanks, Krista. Can you tell us a little bit about what next month's topic will be?
Absolutely. So next month, we are going to do a tips and tricks session on describing animal behavior. And we're going to take a twofold approach to this one. It's not just going to be about describing behavior to, say, a trainer. That's going to be a part of it, so that when you are trying to identify things that are going on with your foster, you may already have the tools to give us all of the information that we're going to be asking for you from you anyway. So it's going to be, on the one hand, describing it in some more technical terms, or at least being able to know the types of questions that we as trainers would ask you if you come to us with a question. And on the other side of that, I am also getting our bios team involved. They are helping me out so that we can work on how we then describe animal behavior in our bios. And this will also help if you're talking to a potential adopter in person, say you're at an adoption event, trying to help us all have those tools to be able to discuss behavior in a way that's a little, I don't want to say more palatable, but easier for people to understand, but phrasing things in a way that is transparent, but not sounding negative, if that makes sense. So
makes sense, because the bio for my dog sold me that I had to meet him. So.
Yes, and we want to make sure that we are highlighting the positives of our dog. We do want to be honest about anything that we are working on with our dog. And I don't want to say we want to sugarcoat any issues, but we want to make sure that we're describing them in ways that don't necessarily automatically turn someone off. And so that's going to be some of, here's phrases to avoid using. And this will just be things that we're trying to do across the board with OPH, is just, you know, kind of weeding some descriptors out of our language and seeing what we can use instead to be a little bit more cohesive across OPH.
That sounds wonderful. Bio writing is an art form.
It absolutely is.
Perfect. Well, looking forward to that. So thank you everybody for your time, and thank you again, Krista, for all your valuable information. So this recording will get posted somewhere soon. I know. All right, so thank you everybody. Have a great evening.
Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you guys have any ideas for topics in the future.
Have a good night.